All right, everybody. So we recently went Uber driving during a crazy thunderstorm in Bradenton, Florida, and Anna Maria Island. Crazy lightning, lots of flooding, and we took this opportunity to make some extra money. If you didn't know, when it rains heavy and it floods, a lot of Uber drivers are not able to get to a lot of places because they have small vehicles. But I do Uber driving out of a large pickup truck with a lift kit, and I can get into places that most small cars won't be able to. So we took this opportunity to get onto Anna Maria Island, an area that had had a lot of heavy flash flooding. Without the competition of other Uber drivers, we were able to make $33 an hour. In a 3-hour period, we made $99. Now here in South Florida, it's seasonal. Most of the people come during the winter, and in that time of the year, this is about what you would make on Uber. But now in the summertime that the snowbirds and the tourists are gone, it's almost impossible to make anything near $33 an hour while Uber driving. Realistically, if you make a third of that, you're lucky. And if you made half of that, it would be a good day. Because in Florida, during the summertime, it is hot, humid, and rainy, and there are no tourists. This is what we call the off season, and it's a very difficult and challenging time for anybody who works in hospitality services. Just about the entire state of Florida suffers economically during the summer because the tourists and the snowbirds are gone, the cities empty out, and it becomes very difficult for the people that live year-round to make ends meet during this time of the year. But with this large pickup truck, we were able to go Uber driving on the islands, and we had some trips that paid incredibly well. The trip we're about to go on now took me out of Bradenton and into Palmetto. Now, Palmetto is an area I really avoid. It's north of downtown Bradenton. But on this particular day, I noticed that the pickup spot was on a restaurant facing the water, a restaurant that has a boat dock. So I figured perhaps somebody went out earlier in the day with their boat, and then they got rained on. Thus, we had to pick up the passengers because they didn't want to get wet. This is kind of like the exception to the rule because I usually stay out of Palmetto, Florida. We're now leaving Palmetto. We're on US 41, what they call the Green Bridge, I believe, heading south. In front of us is the Bradenton skyline. Downtown Bradenton isn't too impressive, but this is what it is. We're driving right into downtown Bradenton. Despite being a fairly short trip, we did it in under 14 minutes. It paid $29. Now, this is the most I've ever made on a short period of time while Uber driving, with the exception of generous tips. This is directly through the app. I was able to make $28 in 13 and a half minutes for a 6-mile trip. That's absolutely the most I've ever made directly through Uber. The reason it was so much money is because this was a reservation. See, the person had made a reservation, but likely the driver canceled it because of the thunder, the rain, and the flooding. A lot of these drivers in Bradenton are very impunctual. You get the idea. They're not punctual at all. These Uber drivers are not very reliable, and they cancel their reservations, leaving people that thought they had a secured ride left waiting for another driver. But that driver, when they pick up that reservation, they actually get paid the fare that the other driver would have got. And because it's a reservation, it's an elevated amount of money. Thus, with this, we can see what I've been saying about Bradenton, that the passengers are very informal, but it also carries on into the drivers. And in the Bradenton area, the islands are kind of rich, fancy areas, but they're unfortunately tied into Bradenton. And many of the people on the island make reservations whether they're going to the airport or a special event. They'll pay extra money to have that Uber ride. Many times I've picked up these high dollar rides along the coast of Bradenton because the people assume that their Uber drivers are going to show up, but they don't. They cancel the reservation, leaving the people hanging, and then another driver can get paid a lot of money for showing up for a job that should have been done by somebody else. And most of the time, you're going to be late to the pickup. You're going to get a notification saying, why aren't you here? Because you agreed to a reservation that wasn't really yours, like if it was your fault. But whatever, it works out that way. You still get that late notification, but regardless, the people are usually pretty happy that at least somebody else showed up. In this case, I didn't receive any tips, but at least the price they paid was kind of more than better. But you've heard me talk a lot about why I don't like to Uber drive in Bradenton is the informality of the passengers, and that carries on into the drivers as well that work this area, leaving a lot of passengers hanging, passengers who, for being from out of state, wouldn't imagine that an Uber driver would make a reservation and then leave them hanging, but it happens quite often. I've got a few of these on Bradenton Beach, Anna Maria Island. People just assume that the drivers are going to keep the reservations. Well, guess what? They don't, especially in an area like Bradenton, where informality is the rule of the law. And many times the people who make the reservation don't understand how the app works. They don't understand that their regular driver canceled and now another driver is heading there, and then they totally flip out on the driver saying you were late when you're just helping them do something that somebody else failed at. But at the end of the day, those are just some of the informalities of Uber driving. And this day, I really did take advantage of the rain. There were surges. The next ride had a $5 tip as well. It was all around a very nice evening to Uber drive. We picked up some passengers. It was a group of males from England. I was really happy about that because, well, I speak English too, you know. So, like, I told them I speak English. And they were just cracking up at my American accents. But I went all out on these guys with jokes. And the other passenger, for some reason I was making a lot of jokes. This passenger that we got the $28 from, they cracked up really, like they had a blast in the back seat. But by the time I got my last passenger of the night, my jokes were wearing away. This was a local person just getting back from work, from working a very long shift. And my jokes just didn't sit too well with her. For some reason, I was just in a joking mood. I was happy, and the first passengers, you know, they had a blast. The ones that with the $28 trip, they were cracking up the whole way. I mean, it was incredibly funny. I need to try like comedy club or something. The other passenger, the English guys, they had a blast, great time. But this last person, the locals that are working, there's just a difference between tourists and people that are just doing fun things, and then you get the locals that are commuting. They're never fun. And it was kind of awkward, I'm not going to lie. And I'm not going to lie, I probably was the one that made the trip awkward. Like, most of the time, it's the passengers who are awkward. But every once in a while, the driver can be kind of awkward, too. Now, we had some good conversations, but I can tell that a few of the things that I said didn't sit too well with the passenger. I think they were being really nice by offering me some leftover foods, and I kind of took offense to it. I said, why don't we just give it to some homeless people? Because I don't really take leftover food from strangers if I can avoid it, unless things get really tough. But I didn't like it. I was like, oh, why don't we just give it to some homeless people? Because for some reason, this person wanted to share their leftover food with me. And I was like, yeah, I'm good on that. I'll pass. I'm sure they were just trying to be nice and courteous to me, but I just took offense to it. And, hey, we all take offense once in a while. It wasn't a bad ride. It was a nice ride, but there were some definitely awkward moments during this ride. And it was definitely like, I was up on riding my high horse over here with tourists and English people and this trip that pays $30 in, 15 minutes or whatever. And then you pick up somebody who's worked a very long shift and they're tired and they're not in the same mood you're in. Always the case with commuters. And anyways, that's how I was able to take advantage of a rainy night to make extra money. I figured most Uber drivers were not going to go onto the island or anywhere really with a thunderstorm and a lot of flooding. If I could go back in time, I would fix some of the things I said to this passenger. I wasn't overly rude or disrespectful. It wasn't like that. It's just after I said it, I was like, oh crap, that wasn't the right thing to say. But, small little mistakes. Like, it's just, you don't want to ever make other people feel uncomfortable. And it wasn't like weird. It was just not the right thing to say. Like when she offered me food, I was like, yeah, just give it to the homeless people. I'm good. I could have probably just been like, I'm fine. But I didn't. I was kind of snobby. And sometimes, you have to put yourself in check. Nobody's perfect. Anyways, other than that, I will have to say that a lot of times I've been criticized for Uber driving out of a pickup truck. And I can say there have been occasions where having this big pickup truck has really played into my favor for a lot of reasons. A lot of people do give me extra tips for the comfort aspect of it. And on an evening like tonight where little Toyotas and little Teslas can't make it through the deep water and they cancel their appointments because it rained a few inches, In those circumstances, a pickup truck like mine is actually pretty handy if you're Uber driving. So it's not all disadvantages to having a pickup truck for Uber. On this particular evening, the pickup truck definitely took a win. There's going to be times where it's going to be evident that I lived in Naples, Florida for over 20 years.